David Cleandon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Kei te mihi nui kia koutou. Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to stand for the Greens to make a brief call to speak in support of this legislation. So when I first read the bill, my thoughts went to the Select Committee, and I wasn't sure whether to envy them the work they have ahead of them or to feel sorry for them for the work they have ahead of them. This bill is unique in my experience, and I suspect it is unique in many ways. It does break new ground. The Minister referred to it as being an ambitious piece of legislation, and it is ambitious in a good way. And I think the challenge for the Select Committee will be to navigate their way through the submissions, through the many, many interests that will be expressed, that will, the many parties who will take an interest in this legislation, and to get us an outcome that's satisfactory for everyone. So I certainly, in a sense, envy them, because it will be, I think, a fascinating process to hear the submissions, to hear from the various interest groups, but also it's because of its complexity and because it is novel. I think there's potential for things to go horribly wrong, but I'm sure the committee will guide the process and get a satisfactory outcome for everyone. We certainly will be supportive of that outcome anyway. So I think why this bill will attract a great deal of attention is the level of attachment to the various landscape features, the maunga, the motu, the land and the waterways around Auckland, around Tamaki Makaurau, carry a considerable burden of attachment, not only for Māori, but for Pākehā New Zealanders, Pākehā Aucklanders, and all of the other extraordinarily diverse and interesting cultural mix that now makes up Auckland's population. For that reason, I think the level of attachment to the maunga and to the various other landscape features does make this somewhat fraught, as I've said, that there will be that level of attachment could easily roll over into distrust, suspicion, concern that the outcomes will not be ideal, and that's something the Select Committee will need to deal with. I think one of the great strengths of this legislation is that it talks about co-governance, so that all the people around the table, all the members of this collective, both Māori, the Council, the Crown representatives, are working at a strategic level. They will be making the key decisions about the future of this landscape and of these places. It's not just a co-management, not to decry the value in different contexts of a co-management model, but this is a co-governance model that's been talked about. All of the various parties, the 13 ropu who make up the collective from the Māori side, the Council, the Crown, through DOC and other agencies, they are the governors of this land. That will carry a considerable burden of responsibility, but also an opportunity to make it better, to reveal the richness and the complexity of that landscape, the interactions human beings have had with it over time. And I think that's going to be something which will be an extraordinarily interesting set of developments, both for the participants at the legal level, at the legislative level, and indeed for the people of Auckland as we progress through. In terms of, I think there is considerable scope within the legislation and within this model of co-governance, of having this collective with authority and responsibility for the maunga in particular. And I think we only have to look at Maunga Ika, or North Head, as an example of what can be done in terms of bringing alive both the ancient and the modern history of a place. The work that the Department of Conservation has done in revealing and interpreting the Māori history, the pre-European history, and then of course the extraordinarily interesting military history of North Head, with the restoration of the old fort, bringing people onto that mountain, opening their eyes to the significance both of the historic and contemporary significance. And I think there's considerable opportunity under this model for the richness of the other sites identified in it to be revealed over time, to be brought to Aucklanders, to open people's eyes to what has happened there. And I think that will make Auckland a better place, a more interesting place, and it potentially will even enhance that attachment that Aucklanders feel to this extraordinary landscape and everything within it. In terms of the islands, at Rangitoto, of course, if there's a single iconic symbol of Auckland, it would have to be that mountain, that island. Put aside the Sky Tower, the Harbour Bridge, all of those things will come and go, but Rangitoto is probably the single identifying motif for the Auckland area, for Tamaki Makaurau, to the extent that that the management, the governance of that island will be affected by this bill. I think there will be a level of concern about that, and we hope that the Select Committee and that people will inform themselves about the positive potential. Similarly with Tiritiri Mātangi, there's been an extraordinary investment of people's time, money, energy, a considerable emotional investment in converting that island from a basically degraded pasture land with a few ramshackle buildings to what would have to be one of the crowns in the conservation estate, restoring the vegetation, the natural ecosystems on that. I was privileged to be on Tiritiri Mātangi on the day that the tuatara were returned a number of years ago. The tuatara brought back to that island as a secure place for them to breed and to continue. So there's this history of engagement, of involvement, of emotional attachment to many of the sites that are dealt with in this bill, and it'll be a major challenge for this governance authority, for this collective group, to make sure that the people of Auckland do feel engaged with the future development and use of these sites, which are important to all of us. It will be a complex task. I don't think we should underestimate how complex it will be. There are historic and existing relationships between the members, the Māori Rōpū, who make up this collective. There is the council interest, of course, which seeks to represent now something like 1 million people. There will be the Crown interest. All of these multiple layers of relationships will not be easy to navigate, and I do think it'll be a major challenge and an opportunity for the collective to ensure that we do get the preferred outcomes. And I think essentially one of the key ingredients to getting good outcomes will be time, simply allowing decisions to be made at a pace and in a way that does not scare the horses, that doesn't give people concern that their Auckland is being taken away from them. Because I do think, I come back to the point, that I believe potential within this legislation and the governance body that will come out of it, there is an opportunity to really enrich people's experience, both people who live in Auckland and those who are fortunate enough to visit it. Sir, I think that's probably as much as I need to say. We are, as I say, this is an ambitious piece of legislation, and I do add my congratulations, I think, to the people who conceived it, to those who have done the work to bring it to this point, and I do wish the Select Committee well in their deliberations. It will be difficult, but it will be an extraordinarily interesting piece of work they have before them, and I wish them well in getting a good outcome for that. Kia ora.
Honourable Tau Henare.
Te mea tūtahi kei a koutou i ako rangatira, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou e koutou haere mai nei I tēnei rā, mō tō